Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar organized by Ankara University Faculty of Distance Education in collaboration with Coursera within All Digital Week Europe. Today we have Dr. Samar Farah from Coursera with us. And thank you very much for accepting our invitation. First, I would like to explain what is All Digital Week, and then I will introduce you our important guest. All Digital Week is annual digital inclusion and empowerment campaign run all across Europe. And it's to motivate people to learn what technology can do for them and by benefiting from digital transformation. So in order to stress the importance of the digital transformation, many countries and many institutions are organizing events within this week, and we are in one of them organized by Ankara University. So as you may already know, we had a collaboration with Coursera last year, and our students and academic staff have benefited from the content of Coursera. And also this gave an important feedback to Coursera to evaluate and to discuss about the recent developments in the labor market, in new skills and digital skills in particular. And we will be able to hear about the findings of this important publication. And as I mentioned, we have an important guest, Dr. Samar Farah from Coursera, to share this recently published research named Campus Skills Report. It identifies the jobs that university students are most interested in and maps the skills and pathways for these jobs. And I would like to introduce you, Dr. Samar Farah. I will read her bio. Dr. Samar Farah is a senior skills transformation consultant focused on Coursera for Campus in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. In her role, she examines the changing skills requirements in the labor market and advises the educational institutions on potential ways in which they could use Coursera for Campus to enhance their outcomes. Prior to Coursera, she spent over 12 years working in educational research and programming in the philanthropy and non-government sectors. Most recently, Samar was the Director of Research and Innovation at the Abdullah Al-Ghuwairi Foundation for Education, where she launched a scholarship program for underserved Arab youth, led research activities, and built a portfolio of projects in the field of online learning with universities across the Arab region. Samar holds a doctorate in international education development from Teachers College, Columbia University, United States. So welcome once again. So as you know, we are now approaching, or maybe even we already stepped into a new digital era. And especially following the pandemic, we saw that digital skills are now much more important than before. There are many discussions. It will be whether good or bad, but there will be a change in the labor market. This is for sure. And also the university students and the universities, of course, should adapt themselves to these changes to prepare their graduates to the new needs in the labor market. And as a person from this area, from the labor economics, personally, I will be also very much interested in hearing your report. And after your presentation, I will collect the questions to forward to you at the end. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hosnet. It's such a pleasure to be here today with all of you and to have been invited to participate in such an important event. And I would say it's very timely, as you've suggested. It's something that we think about very deeply at Coursera, and obviously we spend a lot of time doing research. And so really what I wanted to do today is to focus specifically on the research that we've been doing by presenting some of the findings from a report that just came out a few weeks ago and that is available online that everyone can review. But I would try and put it in a context of what we're seeing at the moment in terms of some of the trends in the labor market across universities, and then talk about some of the key findings, just some interesting insights that we have from that report, and then finally really bring it all together and think what are some of the things, the more practical things that we can be thinking about and doing at a higher education level to really be supporting students as effectively as possible to figure out how best to transition into their careers. Obviously, this is an experience we've all been through or students are going through, but I think the current economic and global context is particularly unique, and I would say likely a lot more difficult in many ways. And so it is a very important topic and one that we should be really addressing very seriously. So this is our agenda that I just mentioned. I will try and leave, hopefully around 15 or 20 minutes towards the end so we can spend time doing questions and answers. And let's jump in. So one of the main, one significant trend that we've been seeing in the market, in the labor market over the last few years, and I think it's been really kind of exacerbated or strengthened by the pandemic over the last few years, is that employers on a global level are starting to think a lot more about skills. And this means that, when they put out advertisements for job roles, a lot of the big companies are no longer placing a prerequisite or a requirement around having a specific degree. It's more about ensuring that a potential employee or a potential job applicant has the right skill set for the job that they're applying for. And so you see companies like IBM and Google and Facebook and others really transitioning away from that focus on degrees. Now, that doesn't mean that degrees are not important. They're just as crucial as they've ever been, but it also means that we need to start thinking about skills and how our graduates are prepared for specific types of job roles. And so some of the stats that you see on this slide will really demonstrate that 62% of employers are starting to consider a skills first hiring policy. 90% would hire candidates who have some sort of certification or badge or coursework instead of a degree. And so these are the kinds of trends that we're going to start to be, that are going to be growing more and more, I think, as we progress. And if we look at the local context in Turkey specifically, I think just to what was discussed earlier, we are starting to see a very significant shift in the types of skills that are going to be needed in the marketplace. And it's very easy for us to say, yeah, we've been hearing about this a lot, technological skills, everyone needs to be focusing on this. But I think it's very important to grasp how significant this change is. In the next, at this point, 8 years, the percentage change in technological skills that will be required is around 63% between where the current, kind of labor force is in Turkey versus where it needs to be. And the same applies for social skills. It's a smaller scale of a change, but it's 22%. So what this means is that we really need to be thinking very critically around how is the upcoming generation developing those kinds of skills? Is anything changing in how we teach them, how we educate them, and how we prepare them for jobs? And if not, what do we need to be doing to ensure that they're prepared for this change? Because if universities are not going to change, then what is really going to help to prepare them for these new types of job roles that are coming up in the future? And to be fair, this is not a trend that we're seeing only in Turkey. This is a trend that we're seeing globally, where higher education is becoming much more important for the average person to be qualified. But also the second point is that they need to be equipped with all these digital skills, as well as what we call human or kind of some of the softer skills or the social skills that you see here. So these are two general trends that we're seeing globally, but I think in the context of Turkey specifically, the numbers really emphasize how urgent this is. And then when you start to think about, okay, well, what does this mean for universities? It also puts a lot of pressure on universities to make some adjustments. But it's also not easy to make these adjustments. University degrees and programs are accredited. It takes a long time. It takes a few years sometimes to get these accreditations, whereas things that change in industry, skills change, the demand for different types of job roles is shifting. And so it's very difficult for academic institutions to adjust in a very kind of flexible way to these changes that we're seeing in the market, to build new content, to hire new faculty, or to train up faculty to be able to prepare for these adjustments. And so this starts to kind of create this pressure both on the higher education system, but also then in the labor market on employers who are not able to find the right talent with the right skills. And so this really is where that gap that we always talk about, the skills gap, that's really where that exists. But it is much more kind of heightened now because of how the pace of change that we've been seeing. And so the question is, what do we do about that? But I think one other point that is worth mentioning is, we always think about the higher education system and the students are in that system. But there's also, a whole other set of, of citizens, I guess, if we want to call them, who could potentially benefit from the opportunities that higher education provides. So if we look at some of the statistics here that we're seeing in terms of kind of the people who are not in education, employment, or training. So NEETs refers to not in education, employment, or training. This is the percentage of individuals who are of a young age group, 15 to 19 in the blue, and then 20 to 24 who are really out of work or education. And if you look at the data for Turkey in particular, and especially for females who are in the ages of 20, 24, there's a lot of them that aren't doing anything in terms of employment or education. So you start to think about, well, there are a lot of opportunities to skill up the broader community, whether it's individuals or people who are looking for jobs who are not really well skilled or don't have the right skill set. So this also feeds into what universities and other educational institutions can do to support in these national efforts to better prepare the labor force for the jobs that are coming up in the future. So with that context, I'll transition to talking about some of the findings in the report, which might help to start to think about, okay, well, we know there are these gaps, but what really is happening on our campuses across the world? And we have a significant proportion of learners and data from Turkey as well included in these findings. So it might give you a sense of, what are the experiences of these students? What are the skills that they actually have? How do they compare to people that are currently working in those kinds of jobs? Are they effectively prepared for these jobs? And then what are they passionate about in terms of what they want to do in the future? And what are some of the things that we can be doing to help them? So just to provide a little bit of context about the report itself, we've been publishing what we call the Global Skills Index for the last few years. And that really provides at a global level, at a country, national level, what are the skills of people in a specific country across different areas and domains. And we would typically focus on things like business, technology, and data, because those are the three domains that we see to be in highest demand and growth. But this year, what we decided to do is we broke that down across our three different areas of work. So we looked at skills at a global level. So we published the Global Skills Report in June, and then we looked at industry skills. So we looked at the skills that are needed across different types of industries. And now with the latest publication on Campus Skills Report, we are focusing specifically on what is happening across the different campuses, university campuses globally, where we are engaging with learners. And we looked at a number of different topics, and I will cover some of these in our conversation today. So the first one is looking at what are the emerging jobs that students want to have in the future. So I'll cover a few of those here, but the 5 emerging jobs that we always see students globally being interested in are a data analyst, a data scientist, a software engineer, a machine learning engineer, and a marketing specialist. So those are the 5 kind of most in-demand jobs among the student population on campuses that we work with. And then there's another section that talks about trends, some of the trends we're seeing across different countries. And there is a focus on Turkey in that. I'll not cover it today, but you can look at it in the report. And the final section looks at, what are the skills to job pathways? So for students across different academic disciplines, across 10 different academic disciplines, what are the skills that they're developing on Coursera, which sometimes may be outside of what they're studying on campus, that they're using to develop themselves, to develop new skills as they're preparing for these potential jobs in the market. So I'll cover a few examples of those. So let's jump in. I'll start with a little bit of methodology. So just to help explain how we came to put together all this data and information. The way Coursera works, one of the key things that we do is we track skills at a very detailed level. We're able to tag, a series of skills to all the courses and the content that we have on our platform. And so when a student is doing an assessment or a quiz on our platform, we're able to link that to them developing a specific skill. And so what that means is that we are able to track that and to see how students are improving, where they're progressing, where they're weak. And we can link that to a specific individual, but also because we have information about what their career goals are, and from different companies that we work with, we know what are the skills you need for different jobs. We're able to pull that all together. So we can link the individual to the career that they want and to the different skills and content that is necessary for them to be successful or proficient for that career. My apologies. So that's really what has allowed us to put together this report and all the data that we collect. And so this is really kind of the basis of the research that I'll be presenting. So if we start by looking at the specific job roles that students identify, they self-select into, they declare when they come onto the platform and say, okay, I'm interested in becoming a data analyst. That is a very kind of popular area of interest. What does that mean? First of all, we break that down into the 6 different skills that are needed to be proficient as a data analyst. For you to be a good data analyst, what are the 6 core skills that you need? They are data analysis, data management, data visualization, math, probability and statistics, and statistical programming. Okay. And when we look at what you see here in those 6 graphs, is you start to see what is the level of proficiency that an individual needs to be good in that skill, to be good for a data analyst job. So if we start to look at data analysis, for example, we see that 5% of students across campuses globally have the level of proficiency that they need in order to be proficient or to qualify for a data analyst job. Whereas the 95% that you see on the left-hand side, the light blue, those are all the learners that are not there yet. So what you see across those 6 different graphs is that when it comes to things like data management, math, and statistical programming, the students seem to have some of those core technical skills that they need in order to be good data analysts in the future. But when it comes to some of the slightly, I would say, softer pieces, softer skills related to that, like data analysis, related to kind of analytical thinking and making some generalizations from the data visualization, which is really knowing how to communicate effectively using that data in a visual way. And probability and statistics, the students are really lacking in that regard. So what this means is, maybe students don't know that these are some of the skills that they need to develop. And so they're not investing their time in them, but also maybe they're not included in some of the content that they're learning on campuses. So maybe that this is where these might be some of the more areas that have never, are not covered in the core academic programs and that need to be invested in more heavily in order to make sure that these students qualify better for these kinds of job roles. Okay, so let's transition to talking about another job role just to see what are some of the other findings. If we look at something like a marketing specialist job role, we see slightly, some trends are slightly different, which is in general, the students seem to be more proficient when it comes to this kind of a job role. Generally, more of them, meet that proficiency target. But again, similarly to what we saw earlier, there are a few areas like project management and social media where they are falling a little bit behind. And once again, what this means is either they're not aware that things like project management or knowing how to use social media effectively, even though they probably spend a lot of their time, their free time on social media, they may not realize that they need to be investing in knowing how to put ads on social media, knowing how to design those ads, knowing how to manage those ads effectively. These are skills that perhaps they're not aware that they need to be learning. And once again, perhaps universities are not incorporating into the learning experiences that students have. And things like social media is a new kind of area of development when it comes to preparing students for these jobs. So they may just have not been incorporated into the core curriculum. Okay, so this is just to give you a snippet of, some of these different types of job roles and the gaps that we're seeing in terms of proficiency. The 3 other areas are covered in the report and you can read through them in more detail. Now, let's focus on the other piece, which is the skills to job pathways. So this might look quite complex and messy. So let me just talk you through the methodology for this section. If you look at the section on the right, please, those are the different careers that the students would have declared they are interested in pursuing once they graduate. So in a particular academic discipline, the students have declared they want to become an architect, a college professor, data analyst, a graphic designer, and so on. Where you see the blocks to be larger, that means there's greater interest in these kinds of job roles. And then on the right-hand side, what you see are the skills that the students are learning on our platform. And so you see many more of those skills, and they're broken down into 3 different colors. What is in the lighter blue are the core skills. So what is core to this academic discipline? The darker blue are what we call multidisciplinary skills that kind of are cover across different disciplines and are relevant for different types of students. And then the yellow are what we have defined as emerging skills. So ones that, typically don't make it into the core curriculum, but there are of increasing demand in the labor market or of, growing interest among students and potentially universities to offer to the students. So once again, here where you see the bigger kind of areas, the bigger chunks, like communication is the biggest chunk, that's because students are spending the most time learning that skill compared to something like writing, for example. So this is really the methodology. And now I'll jump into presenting also 2 more of these different examples of skill to job pathways to present a few more kind of findings that we're seeing. So first of all, if we take, for example, computer science pathway, so that is, for students are studying computer science. If we start to look on the right-hand side first, what are the kinds of key jobs that computer science students are interested in? Well, it's quite straightforward, right? This is a technical pathway, so it's generally clear what someone would do at the end. As you'll see, data scientist is one of the most popular, and so is software engineering. Other areas are like machine learning engineers, to a much lesser degree, data analysts, and so on. So this will give you a pretty clear picture that, overall students are studying in computer science have a pretty kind of set and easy pathway into jobs. But when it comes to the kinds of skills they're developing, well, there's a lot of them, and they cut across those core skills, and I'd say mostly emerging skills that you see in the bottom. And so here, I would say compared to other pathways, there's a very significant focus on these emerging skills, because as you know, this is an area that is all about these new and emerging skills. A lot of that technology is changing very rapidly, and there's always new topics that are coming up. And so you see students are coming to the platform, are really investing very heavily in these emerging topics, because they recognize that this is really what is going to differentiate them from other learners when they're starting to apply for jobs. It's also possible that perhaps these are topics that they're not finding in their core curriculum, in what they're learning in their academic programs, that they're able to collect, they're able to kind of cover some of those core topics and some of these multidisciplinary courses in their academic programs, but really they're investing most heavily on Coursera to develop these emerging skills. Okay. Now, if we look at a social science pathway, and I picked something like that because it's a lot more vague. I'm a social science graduate myself, so it's something, I struggled with when I was in university. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I graduated. And I suspect that the same applies for a lot of students that are now going through some of these academic programs. So once again, you see on the left-hand side, the different job roles are interested in. So it's really kind of researchers are, a familiar, popular kind of pathway, but then you've got everything from, a faculty member, a teacher, an economist, a data scientist, a data analyst, even psychologist, and so on. And then on the right-hand side, you start to, on the left-hand side, my apologies, you see the skills that they're developing. And here you see a different trend. You see a much greater focus on these multidisciplinary skills, which makes sense. For social scientists, there's a lot of kind of overlap with other areas, but also really a lot of them are quite technical. You see computer programming and finance and marketing and human resources. Once again, this demonstrates that, students probably recognize that these are all skills that are in high demand at the moment, and that will really help to boost their profile as they're graduating. And then you'll also see quite a lot of people investing in these emerging skills as well. So this is really, a slightly different trend that you're seeing across the social sciences among the students that are pursuing that path. And so, sorry, I already went through that. So now that we've seen some of these paths, and as I said, you can review the others. We have 8 other academic disciplines that are covered in the report, so you can take a closer picture and see some of the changes and the differences in the trends. But I think, just to make sense of everything we've just looked at, what are some of the key takeaways? What are some of the things that we can learn from some of this research that I've just shared, and that can help us support our students to guide them on, how best to prepare for this landscape. So some of the general findings that we found in the report is that students lack direction regarding their future careers. And that's something that you might see on a daily basis in your interactions with your students, but it's always helpful to see some of the data that helps to reflect that. What we see is that students don't often know where to focus their time or what skills to learn. And that was demonstrated in those different job roles that they're interested in, and the fact that they really, there were areas where they had strong proficiency and others where they didn't. So sometimes they know what skills they have to learn, but they don't reach the right proficiency level. And sometimes they don't even know what skills they should be learning. We also see that many students are interested in roles which are not entry level. And that was something else that was quite interesting, is that they might have an idea of what they want to pursue in the future, but that's not really the first job that they're going to get after they graduate. So we need to provide them with some more guidance to understand, okay, well, you might want to become, a marketing manager, but you need to start, by being an analyst perhaps before that, or supporting a marketing manager before you can pursue that. And so there are different skills that you'll need to develop in order to pursue that, before you transition into that future job role. And finally, and I would say on the positive side, is that students are focused on tech skills across almost all disciplines. As you saw in the social sciences pathway, the skills to job pathway, students were investing heavily in some of these business and tech and data skills because they recognize that these are really the kinds of skills that are going to be needed regardless of what industry and what type of job role you have in the future. And so that is definitely a positive trend that we're seeing, which demonstrates that the students are mindful of some of these changes around them, and they are starting to make the right decisions to prepare for them. And so what are some of the things that we can consider as a result of this research? The first, and this is, just based on the conversations that I've been having with a lot of institutions across Turkey and across other countries in Europe and the Middle East and Africa, but also from our engagements and from the data that we've been collecting. The first one that I can think of is universities can consider integrating these emerging and softer skills into academic programs. Emerging skills, as you saw, are an area that students are investing in, probably a lot of the time because it is hard. It's not as easy for universities to stay on top of them and to create that content, to find the right faculty to teach them. But I think where it's possible to make that available, or at least to offer flexibility for students to have enough elective courses in their curriculum to be able to pursue some of these options outside of their core academic offerings. That is something that students definitely seem to value, and we know is appreciated in the market. And I mentioned the human or kind of the social skills because of the research that I showed at the beginning, which is really where we're seeing, there's a very significant need for people to have those kinds of skill sets. And I should say that from our conversations with a lot of Turkish universities, including Ankara, it seems that the universities have been thinking very wisely to offer students access to platforms like Coursera and others as those elective modules. So really giving the students the opportunity to develop new skills that perhaps they're not developing on campus, that will help to create a great complement to the academic degrees that they're getting on campus. So this is one definite opportunity that I see as a result of the data and some of the trends that we're seeing. The second one is around giving students insights into those entry-level jobs and supporting their skill development accordingly. So as we saw from looking at these specific job roles the students are interested in, there's clear gaps in some of the skill set that students need for those jobs. So the extent to which faculty members know what these jobs, entry-level jobs, look like, know the skill sets that are needed, they're able to provide some guidance to the students around, okay, what are the things that you need to, strengthen your skill set on? These are some areas that you need to improve on. Maybe bring in speakers from industry or recent graduates that have gone into some of these jobs who can speak to that real life experience and can talk about, what are actually the gaps in that are needed to be addressed, and to provide students with a little bit more guidance and structure on what they should be focusing on and how much time they should be spending on different skills. And the third one is related to that, I would say. This is something we hear about a lot, is students saying that they're lacking hands-on experiences. And this can be as simple as knowing how to use specific software or tools that they'll be using in the workplace, Or at a more complex level, it can be, just not having an opportunity to do internships, or just, get that experience with different companies so that they have a sense of, okay, is this the right job for me? What does it look like for me to work in a company? What are some of the basic skills that I need to have as I prepare for, applying for an actual job? And so that, I think all of these experiences are very important, and the extent to which universities can be structuring them into the curriculum as much as possible to ensure that the students really get the best of the theory, but also the application as well. And finally, I think to return back to the graph that I shared earlier around all the learners outside of the typical student population that are not in employment and education and training, there's a lot of opportunity to be thinking about what are these flexible lifelong learning and upskilling opportunities that can be offered online to the broader community to support in driving that upskilling of the nation. There's a lot that universities are very well equipped to do, and it's an opportunity to really to use those facilities, those resources that you have, to be providing that that kind of training that is needed to prepare everyone, really all of us, every so often, to upskill them in different areas and make sure that they are able to qualify into all these new jobs that are going to be coming up. And so I think using this new online model that has now become very common and very accepted, making the most out of it in order to support those broader populations is really a good investment. So that's everything from my side. I realize I went a little bit over time, but I'll pause here. Would love to hear any questions or comments from the attendees.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farah. It was really interesting. And we are now expecting the questions from the audience. But before, maybe I can forward one or two. And also, it was very interesting to learn about the report by Coursera, which is a very important platform for the students and the professionals who would like to invest in their human capital. So by benefiting from what you have there and also combining these with other skills that they can develop by different education methods, they will be prepared for the new labor market in the future. Of course, there are some tasks and homeworks for the universities, not just for the individuals, but the universities obviously seem to adapt themselves, adapt their curriculum for these new skills and skill-oriented, let's say, education. And I really had a lot of notes to share with my colleagues. So thank you very much for sharing this with us. And it seems also that some jobs are at risk at the moment, and maybe in the near future or far future, we will lose some of the jobs, what we have today, and instead they will be replaced by these new jobs with these emerging skills. And but before my question, we received one question from Dr. Denizer Yıldırım. In the future, the skills required of individuals seem quite complex and interdisciplinary. How do you think we should interpret this situation? For example, are the current course curricula sufficient? What is the situation in British higher education?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's a complex one. So I think, we should never, just assume that the status quo is sufficient. I think given how fast the world of work is changing, we should constantly be thinking and rethinking what we're offering to our students and think about what could we be doing better. So, and there are different ways to do that. Some of it involves doing structured, robust surveys of your alumni to see what happens to them after they graduate. What kinds of jobs are they getting? What gaps did they feel that they had as they, as they started those first and second jobs? You can also be engaging with employers to hear from them. What are they seeing in the market in terms of your graduates? What do they think are some of these gaps that they see? And start to think about what can you be doing differently within your curricula. So part of it involves maybe, as you said, providing more interdisciplinary opportunities for students to take some of the develop some of the skills that might be outside of the core curriculum within an academic program, making sure that there's a focus on these digital skills, but also making sure that it relates to what they're studying. It's important for people to feel like this is relevant to them. So for example, one really interesting initiative that I've seen at a university in Casablanca in Morocco is it's an engineering degree. In the first year, the students are expected to work on group projects where they engage with local industry on a real life problem, on a real life challenge. So they'll pick an industry. Last year was agriculture, and they brought in a number of companies that would propose to them some problems that they're facing in their industry. And the students would have to work together on a project that is interdisciplinary, that may be outside of their areas of kind of expertise. And so they would take courses on Coursera to learn different skills, and they would have to put together a prototype that they would present to that company as a potential solution. So this is just a very kind of simple example of how you take a lot of these interdisciplinary skills, bring on a real life challenge, make it practical, but ensure that these students also collaborate together, learn how to build something new, have problem solving skills, and so on. So there's different ways to think about, making adaptations to curricula that might not require, a lot of changes, significant changes in accreditation, because I know that that's complicated, and obviously look very different for different disciplines. And ultimately, you are the faculty, you know them best. But these are just some ideas and things that I've seen that I think can be useful to think about.
Thank you. And also not just for the natural sciences or other disciplines, but also for social sciences. It's very important to develop digital skills. Sometimes we misinterpret this, and it looks like digital skills are just for the technical side students, but not really. And also digital skills are even more important than maybe for the social sciences at this moment. And this is also a good opportunity for students to develop and to know this, at least at the beginning.
Including things like arts and humanities. A lot of these types of jobs are going online. So a lot of content production, media creation. So those are digital skills as well, learning how to create websites or, create videos and so on. Write content that is engaging, that, would be in a short form online is also not easy, but this is a lot of what those kinds of jobs are in the future. And so also helping the students see that. So this is why I was talking about bringing in people from industry who can demonstrate that, this is what a real life job looks like. And the students have a clearer picture of what their future would be,
So I'm checking if we have any other questions. Not in the chat box, I think.
In YouTube.
Okay, we will just check YouTube, and then maybe we can conclude afterwards. And it's obvious that they need a lot of guidance, not just by the university, maybe even before, because they will choose the university and the department at the end of their high school years, and it starts from there. And then afterwards, especially the career centers at the universities will need to work harder and harder to close these gaps and direct the students to the correct sectors according to their skills. Another question, okay. What do you think about translation sector? translators grow stronger or will be dead for just one time. I think most valuable language translators will forget. What about your opinion? So maybe this question is related with the technological capacity of the translators, online translators and the other tools. So maybe we can consider this within this context.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's an issue we face ourselves at Coursera in terms of translating our content. Mm-hmm. And we generally have found that the machine kind of learning translations are just not there yet. The quality of those translations are just not good enough. So we still depend on human translations for a lot of what we see. Now, it's quite possible that we'll see the technology advance very significantly, and it's very fair to say that some of those translations will or translators will have to find other areas to work in. It's not an area of my expertise, but I definitely think that in the nearer term, I don't think that's going to be shifting, especially when it comes to things like interpretation. That is always needed, and also review of machine learning translations. It's going to take a lot of data for the machine to be able to interpret different contexts. Mm-hmm. And so I think for good quality translators, they will still always be opportunities for them to provide that contextualization that is needed, especially if they're ones that work across important languages and context. So yeah, I mean, I'm not the expert on this, but I think it's fair to say that we're still not there with the machine learning translations. We definitely see that on a daily basis, that we still need human translations very much.
Okay, we received a clarification to this question. Our guest said he meant that translation sector, English, Turkish, German, simultaneous or consecutive interpreting. But at the last part of your speech, you also addressed to this explanation. And one more, the most important issue in 21st century is learning the learning, not learning the information. Do you agree with this?
Yes, I very much agree. Actually, one of our most popular courses on our platform is called Learning How to Learn. I'm not sure if any of you know it, but it's very, very popular among students, although it's a course really for anybody. I took it recently as a professional. I think we've had about 3.5 million people take it. And it's exactly about that, how to master difficult subjects, how to learn effectively, how not to procrastinate, how to retain knowledge and information, and just know how to manage yourself in those situations. So I couldn't agree more. And it's even listed in the World Economic Forum top 10 most important skills for the next few years. Active learning and learning methodologies is, I think, the second or the third most important skill. So I definitely agree with that.
Great. So thank you very much, Dr. Samar Farah. It was a very big pleasure to host you in this event, and we benefited a lot. So once again, thank you for your contribution to the event, and also in terms of our collaboration with Coursera. So maybe until next time, let's say.
Yes, indeed.
Take care, and hope to meet you in the future.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you also for our guests and for your participation, and have a good day. Stay healthy. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.